Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the final and the last part of our replatforming series. In the first 3 episodes, we spoke about why to replatform, what is replatforming. In the second episode, we spoke about how to estimate replatforming projects, what are some of the challenges, nuances, uncertainties around estimation. And in the third part, we spoke about how to approach the discoveries associated with this replatforming, things to keep in mind, what can go wrong, what can you discover, how to discover, and things like that. And now we are back with our final episode of this series to talk more about how to build, launch, and grow your DXP platforms after replatforming. So continuing on our journey, I invite again our guest over here, Panshul, Sabreena, and Abhishek. Welcome back, all of you.
Hi, Prateek.
All right, so we have made it. We have made it to the last episode. I guess all of you are, I don't know, excited or sad about it that we are approaching the end of this series. But I'm really looking forward to this final episode of today.
Same here, Prateek. It's a mixed feeling that we have today, and excited for the last episode as well.
Awesome. So I guess let's get the ball rolling. I guess and continuing on our journey, and maybe starting with you, Sabreena. Can you explain and talk a little bit more about what are some of the specific methodologies or frameworks that you follow to plan and execute a migration project?
In more specifically, like if I talk about the FE perspective, how we basically plan around that. Like though there's not a framework, but we follow some methods so that we can go around how we can execute the migration. Like if we talk about the Drupal. So in terms of the FE layer, I can say like we have to think about like if we are migrating the existing theme, when we are migrating from one to another platform, are we going to use the same branding, same theme, if it's existing theme, or are we creating a new theme? So that's the one thing that we need to think upon. So if it's an existing theme, so how much compatible it's with the latest version? If it's Drupal, so we have to see it's compatible, whether it needs updates or not. The templates or the CSS, JS that needs the libraries that we've used, that needs updates. Those things we need to check regarding the migration. Or if it's a completely new theme, then that would be created from the scratch. But for that as well, we have to ensure the designs that we got that are meeting the accessibility standards, that are having the responsive breakpoints and all. The modern, whatever the modern compliances we have, that is following, even if it's a new thing. So that's one thing that we follow during the content, during the migration. Another thing is like if we are using some framework, maybe the existing project is already using some framework, like some maybe Bootstrap or Tailwind or something. So while we upgrade it, do we need upgradation for that as well? It needs some updates. So that is second thing regarding the existing. Or the third thing is like the tooling. What kind of tooling we are using while we are migrating? Are we optimizing our theme? The front-end layer, we are using the performance techniques. Are we using the like CSS, JS minification, loading, lazy loading, minification of images? Those things we have to consider. And in the migration, are we following the component-based approach? Because if we are replatforming, so we are doing that or not. Consider we have a content, like it was a maybe a content in one, maybe in one field. Are we dividing or breaking that content into multiple fields probably so that it will be reusable? So we are building components, bigger things we are dividing into smaller atoms, like we are following the atomic design principles, where we can have maybe a button. I can take an example of a button. We can break down a large component into a button, and then maybe a card kind of thing, a model. Those things are we following. We are following the atomic design principles. Or if we use some pattern library or design library, how we can use that in the migration setup. And on top of that, maybe like if it's like in the current standards, the site should be completely responsive. It's not like it's adapting to some specific breakpoints, like it's working on this device but not another device. So it should be completely responsive. The migrated content should be responsive. So those things we follow. And one more thing, while migrating the content, like while we migrate the content, usually the layout breaks when we have a large content, maybe one fail. So we customize the like editor experience. Like suppose we have Visivik, so we customize that Visivik editor so that even if tomorrow the content editor writes any content, any image within the same content, is it working correctly? Is it working across all breakpoints? Is it meeting the accessibility standards? So we customize that Visivik experience also. We do some customizations, maybe from the backend, the toolbar we customize, or we add some stylings, or we give options to editors so that if they want to look, the content should look like this, they want to add a color, or it should follow the color contrast. Like if we add some, maybe we have a single content, we want to add content there. And if it's, we are using maybe the dark mode, light mode options. So whether that content is following that color contrast issues or not. So we can set the color there. So we are giving some customizations while migrating. We have to think of these aspects. I believe these are the things like we should consider in terms of FE perspective, like those all things, the approaches, layouts, customizations, component approach. These are all things we should follow.
Yeah, no, these are like really a lot of things that you spoke about, right? I mean, as you mentioned, these layouts, pattern libraries, and that sort of stuff, right? But are there any best practices to do it? So, for example, let's say, and I know we do a lot of replatforming to Drupal as an example, Sabreena. But then like using the core, not touching upon the core, and then building the custom module only when it's needed, keeping the component design in a manner so that it's reusable across the layouts and templates. So how do you start? I understand like adopting that mindset, but then in the build, in the development phase, right? How do you ensure that is happening in a manner? How you also, are there QE or quality engineering or quality testing approaches that happens to kind of ensure that you're following the accessibility and other standards? So tell us a bit about that. Like how do you incorporate that during the build phase?
Yeah, like first we will see like if we can, like our major thing will be like it should be reusable. Like if we can use the existing system, like the out of the box things, if we can use that, but at the same time we have to see whether it follows, like as you mentioned, like it's following the compliances, the modern compliances, it's accessible. Like even if maybe we have some component that's already coming out of the box, we don't have to create any markup for that probably, but we have to see whether it's following that standard. Like if it's like when we are it's following that hierarchy. Like suppose we are creating a I can give a simple example of maybe I created a banner. It has probably an image, it has a heading, it has a paragraph, it has maybe a button. But if it is coming out of the box, like markup is already generated, but it is following that accessibility guideline, it's following that if it's a heading, then it could probably, it's a page title, it could be H1 probably. But if it's directly, maybe it's coming out of the box, it says an H3, suppose it's coming. So is it correctly, like, is it semantically correct or not? So that we have to first see, okay, whatever is coming by default there, or whatever the existing code is there, can we use that, or we can make further enhancements to that code? Is there a need of creating custom module or a custom template or kind of thing? That things we have to consider. So basically it involves like deep dive into the code and then see whether we need customizations or we can just enhance that.
Got it. That makes sense. And then having this customization in a manner so that we don't touch upon the core, and then it's easy to maintain it, right? As we go further into the build and then getting into the maintenance and the growth phase of the platforming projects as well.
Yeah, it should be scalable basically. Like if we are creating something, it's not like if I'm using it, suppose on one page, it should be scalable. It should be usable on other pages or as well. It shouldn't break. It's working on this and it's working on that. So it should be reusable. But at the same time, if you want variations to the same thing, we should be able to create multiple variations of it based upon some flags. Like, okay, this is component, like we have a button here and we are using that on another page as well, but there is a variation of that. So it should be scalable, flexible, so that we can use it across multiple pages.
And I
got it. That makes sense.
And I just wanted to give one more dynamics over what Sabreena has spoken about, right? So scalability and another aspect is maintainability, right? When you when you start working on a project, the code grows, and there are a lot of it is highly important that how you maintain your code, right? So there is a new paradigm that is called single directory components, right? Where you accommodate or every aspect of component within a single directory, right? From the CSS, their templates, their custom logic, and everything, and so on and so forth. So it brings a maintainability in your entire project lifecycle. And whenever switch on or switch off a particular module, so it's just it is just to keep that code in your project, or just get out from your repository. So in that way, you are able to maintain your entire project.
No, that's a very valid point, Abhishek. I think this kind of maybe aligns with more of a modular approach or a composable approach, not only at the architecture level, like there are these services which are composable module, but I think what you mentioned by giving a single directory components or SDCs, right? Even within the code, right? These are like different components, right? Which are self-sufficient and then can be used across your project. So keeping that in mind is like really, really crucial to maintain them on a longer run, right? So along those lines, or maybe even beyond it, Abhishek, right? I know we touch upon some of these multilingual and multi-site setups in our previous episodes as well. But what are some of the best practices that you adopt to approach the build of these multi-sites and multilingual large builds? I recollect we did something on OCHR as well, where there were like 6 official UN language. It was a large setup. It wasn't a multi-site in that particular project, but then a lot of multilingual aspects were there, right? So how do you approach? What are the best practices around this?
So basically, approaching to a multi-site and multilingual site is require a different kind of understanding. So you have to do a in-depth understanding on an analysis of existing setup. What are the content that is being translated? There could be multiple content types, taxonomies, and the menu architecture, and there could be some websites, static content, right? That has to be translated in a way. So Drupal comes a very powerful multilingual setup, right? Where modules like local translations, right? Configure translation could be used to set up a multilingual setup on any Drupal website, right? And while you are migrating the content, you have just need to establish a perfect matching between the source and the destination to fetch the relevant data, right? And in the same lines, when you are thinking of multi-site setup, there are multiple ways of achieving that thing, right? So maybe Drupal comes within it's capable of having multi-site setup within that. So you can use the Drupal itself to set up the multi-site where your Drupal code base become a single source of truth, and then you have multiple databases for each of these web instances, right? Where the maintainability of the code is promised because of the centralized code access, and whereas these websites could have different sort of contents because of those are connected with the different databases. This is the one approach. Second approach, there are lots of proprietary solutions. For example, EQS Site Factory that could be used to for multi-site setup, and it is wonderful because it gives a single entry point where you can manage all the websites running on a different instances. It gives you the better editorial experience and user management options within a single interface. Other proprietary solution that I must highlight is custom streams that is offered by the Pantheon, which you can use to set up your multi-site architecture, and it is more scalable, and flexible with the terms of its developers' experience, right? So that is the main difference between when you are using a EQS Site Factory and the Pantheon custom streams. So these are the options where that could be used to set up your multilingual sites, and then you can scale up it to including multilingual setup within this ecosystem.
No, makes sense. I think this kind of reminds me of that opportunity where we were considering. Obviously, there was EQS Site Factory, there was Pantheon custom upstreams, there was WordPress multi-site, and there was a contentful-based multi-site as well, right? I mean, how do we compare these platforms and all, right? But Abhishek, or maybe to you, Panshul, or one of you, right? I mean, does the development approach differ based on these platforms? I mean, largely, like if you were doing it with custom upstreams versus the EQS Site Factory versus, I know, I mean, these platforms are different. So obviously the way you code and the way you architect is different, but then are there any major differences in the thought process as well, how you architect and approach multi-site setups depending upon these tools and platforms?
That's a great question, and I think I can answer that. And I'll take an example over here. So we recently worked on this project, which was a multilingual implementation, and thanks Abhishek for explaining the multi-site and multilingual aspect, and the fact that Drupal takes care of the translations on its own. You just have to think about one content and you can translate into multiple languages, and you just have to configure different languages. So this was the project where we configured around 3 or 4 languages initially, and then we started working towards the content translation. Now it was now the next step for us was to identify what would be the way or what is the process of the identification of the translation that will be displayed to the site visitor. Let's say if I'm trying to access the site from UK, then the site has to go, the user has to go to the URL, let's say example.com/en-gb, right? And if the site visitor is coming in from France, then the URL should be example.com/fr-fr, which means that the language of the content would be French, and also the region is French. So this was an example where there are multiple languages, 3 to 4 languages involved, and it is important for us to build a mechanism which would help in identification where the site visitor is coming in from, and then display the site accordingly. So what we did was, again, the behavior of, or I would say the trait of an engineer is to get towards the solution. So we immediately started analyzing if there are any pre-existing modules, contributed modules that would help us in figuring out this particular implementation. And if not, should we start thinking about a custom solution as well? So we started thinking about the solution in that terms. We tried few modules, and these modules involved some third-party integrations as well. And these third-party integrations were not completely, they were, I would call them premium services. They were free till some aspect or till some numbers, and then there were some, payments involved. So in this case, it was getting difficult for us to find out the solution. So what should we do in such cases? Then we started discussing this solution, and in this case, Acquia was involved. So we started creating multiple Acquia support tickets, and thanks to Acquia as well for prompt responses, because we were able to solve multiple problems using Acquia tickets as well. So we created an Acquia ticket, and we got to know that we don't have to build any custom solution. Acquia server handles this kind of redirection on its own. So we don't have to use any contributed module. We don't have to come up with the custom solution as well. So the point that I'm trying to make over here is the platform that you're working on, it does really matter when it comes to building a solution, because in some cases it happens that the solution is provided by the platform itself. In our case, this particular redirection was implemented by Acquia server. It was there on the Acquia cloud, so we don't have to write any custom code. We didn't have to write any or integrate any module. In some cases, these platforms would not offer this kind of functionality or this kind of flexibility as well. And in such cases, you would have to go with some kind of plugins. And if in case you're working with WordPress, then it's plugin. If in case you're working with Pantheon, then maybe you'll have to write your custom solution. So you'll have to work in that sense. You'll have to understand what platform provides. And in some cases, there are unknowns, and it is best to connect with the experts as well. In this case, we connected with Acquia by creating a support ticket.
No, that's a great advice, Panshul, right? I mean, leveraging the platform and obviously designing and then building the application in that context, so that you can leverage whatever benefits the platform gives. In this case, Acquia, Contentful, WordPress, Drupal, or any other platform as well, right? But then this kind of triggers me to ask this as well, right? So while you are kind of building the application in the context of these platforms, right? How do you still ensure there is no vendor lock-in, right? You don't build the application that is too tied up with the vendor as well. Or there are cases where you get stuck with the vendor as well. And what is the trade-off of that? And what are some of the best practices? And how do you actually do and take care of it, or even educate customers about those lock-ins if they exist?
I think I can take this question up, and I've seen various scenarios where the customer, they understand that in future, in some cases, it may the solution may end up in such a way that it is not extendable according to the platforms, because we have tightly coupled the solution with the platform as well. So in such cases, what happens is that the customer would request that, why don't you write a custom solution, or why don't you write a solution in such a way that it is easy for us to plug it out from this particular place and plug it into something else. Why don't you write the solution in such a way? So in some cases, customers are already aware of such scenarios, but where there is the lack of awareness from the customer's end, we ensure that we are building the solutions in that way, in that sense, that we are avoiding the vendor lock-in situations. And again, I would take an example of the custom solutions, itself. The way we write the code is built in such a way that you'll be easily able to disable it from one platform and enable it on another platform. Because what happens is that sometimes you're writing the solution in terms of programming language itself, right? So for example, if I talk in terms of Drupal, there are some hooks that Drupal provides on its own. You may want to avoid writing these hooks, and you may want to create simple PHP classes that are pluggable, that are easily movable to some other platform. Maybe you want to move it from Drupal to WordPress as well. So you can simply take up this PHP solution and move it to WordPress. Or maybe you want to do it vice versa as well. The solution is already written in WordPress and PHP. You just take the PHP classes out from WordPress and then introduce it into the custom solution in Drupal. So you're avoiding that vendor lock-in situation as well. And as I said, sometimes the customers are fully aware of these scenarios, but where there is a lack of awareness, we ensure that we are writing the solution in such manner.
Now, it makes sense. It's all about like being aware of the things, and then it's not like vendor lock-in is always bad as well. There are certain advantages to be gained because you kind of save time and effort and kind of using the tools and the services provided by that particular vendor, and then that is an advantageous, and especially when you have a long-term roadmap aligned with the vendor or the platform as well. So that makes sense, Panshul. Maybe over to you, Sabreena. I know you already touched upon a bit already. Talking about approaching the UI development side of the things. But I want to come back to specifically around the component development approach, especially building these applications, because we are talking about these platforms as well. So let's say in Acquia, we use Site Studio. In Drupal terms, we will either go with sometimes paragraphs, layout builders, or some other. Now there's this experience builder also coming in Drupal in general, right? So how does your approach change when in the development, in the build phase, like while working with one platform, keeping one platform in mind, like Site Studio versus Paragraph, Layout Builder, or any other platform that you may have worked with?
Yeah, it's a good question, like, because there are multiple things in it. Like, ultimately, we have to take a decision on what we are going to use, because while the build is, we create a development plan where we have to decide upon, okay, which approach we follow. Like, if we are going with I'm just taking the example of the Site Studio. Like, it's if we are using that, then we are going to approach should be common. Like, we are going to use a modular approach. It should be whether it's with Site Studio, whether we are using the Drupal paragraphs or layout builder or experience builder. Approach should be modular and component based approach. And now it varies. Like, if we are going with the Site Studio, like if we are already taking that, then we can, even with the Site Studio, we are taking that component based approach. We are going to create the components. We are going to create the small, like we are using the, as I mentioned earlier, we are going to use the atomic design principles where we will create small atoms elements, like it's a button element, it's a link element, whether it's Site Studio or if it's a Drupal, like traditional Drupal approach where we will create our own components. Either we can go with the default, like we create our own patterns, small atoms, then we will join those atoms and create a molecule. Like we have a button and then we integrate button with the form elements, create a full form, and then we create maybe big pages. So it's again like how we follow that modular approach. We have to decide upon either Site Studio or either Drupal paragraphs or layout builder or combination of everything. It depends upon the requirement, how the customer wants. Like if they want completely flexible thing, maybe we can go with the Site Studio where they have full flexibility over the layout and all. Or if they want something kind of tightly coupled where they don't want much control over the content and all, then maybe we can go with the structured approach, have a proper twig template where we will structure everything in one thing. But still within that thing, like even if the structured approach, we have to use the components that we will integrate within that template. Like we are going to reuse that component. It's not like it will be tightly coupled and it won't be used anywhere else. We are integrating those small components within the template, whether it's a Drupal template, whether it's a Site Studio template. It will be small things that we're integrating. So modular approach, anyways, we're going to follow whatever will be the framework we are going to use. So that is there. And on top of that, if you are going to use some library as well, like we have suppose pattern lab, we have storybooks, are we going to use that as well? Like we suggest that, like if we use that, with that, what it helps, like it will allow us to create a more like component based approach. But maybe tomorrow we are going with the decoupled approach. Maybe like right now we are just using the Drupal, but tomorrow we want to go with the decoupled one. So we can just directly use those components there. It's not like it's coupled with the Drupal and we can't use it. Like if it was, we are just doing twig templating, we're using the twig templates only, then it will be tightly coupled. But if we are using a component modular way, then we can just use those components in decoupled approach as well. We just have to integrate we have to just integrate the data, but the reusability will still be there. So we have to develop a plan in that way that it should be scalable enough. It should be reusable enough. And on top of that, like while It's just how we are going with the approach. But on top of that, we have to see how we are going to use the latest techniques like accessibility standards that I already mentioned, that we have to definitely consider, responsive things we have to consider, optimization things we have to consider, how we are enhancing the page load, how we are minifying the JS, CSS, how we are doing that, how we are using the analytics, how we are using the lighthouse, so that we are making sure that whatever we are building, that is meeting the standards. Those things we have to consider. On top of that, maybe like as I already mentioned, like are we going to use like a tooling system, like are we using the Gulp, are we using the Vue.js, are we using the Webpack? That things we will see, but these things we have to lay down what toolings and all we are going to use. And one more example came to mind while we talk about the multi-site setup or the multilingual setup, that we can, like, we have to see for those things as well. Like if it's a multi-site setup, is it like we are going to build a common theme and then we have multiple themes? Do we have separate branding, or we have different themes? Each theme has its own branding. We are not going to use a common theme. So there could be two things: one base theme, multiple sub themes having their own branding guidelines, or it could be different themes within the same, code base. There are multiple themes. Each theme has its own branding guidelines. Everything is different. So they are using their own themes, but we can use a common tooling. Again, we have to see a performant approach. Tooling shouldn't be different. Like this theme is it's one tool, then another tool. Have a common structure where we are using the common tooling. Like suppose I'm using the Gulp, so it should work for all. If I'm running and executing in command, it should work for all themes. It shouldn't be like I have to go again and again and run the commands again and again. So common tooling for all. So it depends upon how is your, like what kind of project you are migrating. So at the end, like it should be efficient enough, whether tooling, whether multi-site, or even in the multilingual support. If it's if you're using multiple languages, when we switch the content, is it correct? Like, isn't the content breaking? If it's an RTL kind of thing, like if you're using the right to left approach, then those things we have to consider. How we are accommodating that? Are we considering that? Are we doing it manually? Like earlier, what we were doing manually. When there was a RTL kind of thing, we were manually adjusting the padding, the margins. But now we can use NPM packages for that. We can add the RTL support for that, and it will automatically convert. Like suppose if I'm using padding left, let's say I'm using padding left, but when I'm automating it, it will automatically convert into the padding right when we are on the RTL thing.
Right.
So those things, it shouldn't be manual enough. We should use the automated things so that it will be quite efficient. Those things we like while we are planning the UI components while the development phase.
No, this reminds me, right? I mean, there are so many common things that like you just spoke about, like you use, I guess, on OSCHR project as well. There was RTL as well over there. There was multilingual. Yeah. There were like different themes, but then similar components that were, I think, used for like primary OSCHR.org and then stand up for human rights as well. So we were able to kind of create that sub-theme structure as well, where Stand Up for Human Rights, a campaign websites retained its theme, but still utilizing the same tooling across the entire platform, right? So that's a really a crucial thing to keep in mind while building these platforms. And like I think Abhishek, you mentioned earlier, right? All of these things coming together helps with the maintainability of the platform, right? So it's really crucial. So one other thing apart, like doing this build, right? So obviously we spoke about the templates, a little bit about building these platform, page building, and that sort of stuff, right? Panshul, the one other major aspect is the integrations. We already touched upon the integration during the estimations episode as well, like how difficult or easy and the uncertainties around the integration. But what are the different approaches that you use to integrate these new builds with different services that exist already, that customer may have already a different homegrown tool versus the proprietary services? What's your approach to build and integrate these third-party services?
Now you're done with the estimations. You're also done with your discovery session. So you've got enough time to think about the proof of concept. You might have gone through the third-party integration as well. And in a lot of cases, what happens is that these integrations, they come up with some documentation as well. So if I take an example of a CRM integration, I'm sure there is some kind of documentation, API documentation available in the backend that would help you to integrate this solution with your current site. In some cases, you also have to ensure that, let's say if you're implementing a Drupal website, in these cases, there are already available modules that you can simply integrate with the site and you'll get along with the integration. But in some cases, what happens is that you may have to write a custom solution. So you should definitely refer to these API documentations, because this API documentation is more or less like a guideline for you to implement the solution. right steps that should be taken to ensure that the integration works correctly. You're sending, if in case you're sending the data from your site to these integrations, then the data is being sent in a proper manner and it is being accepted by the third-party integration as well. Because we have seen scenarios where we were done with our side of integration, but the customer reported that, you say that this is implemented, but I don't see the data coming in on this particular platform, this integration. So why don't you go back and look into this integration again? Maybe you have to change something in the code. You'll have to figure some things out. Maybe there is an authentication required in the backend that you'll have to figure out to make sure that these integrations are working. So definitely refer to these documentations, these guidelines, so that you are implementing the solution properly. And in some cases, you'll have to try these implementations out. Even though you're done with POC, I would still recommend try things out first and then see if this can be implemented at large scale. So maybe you try implementing a small module, a small functionality, pick up one of the functions from the APIs available and see what is the data that is being returned. And based upon the data returned, then you start writing the complete solution. So in such scenarios, it is important for you to understand the third-party integrations from the implementation standpoint, the brand guidelines, the guidelines from the developer documentation. And also, it is important for you to discuss these integrations with complete team as well. Sometimes what happens is that you're thinking about integration from one standpoint, but then there's this senior developer in your team who comes up with a solution saying that, this is something that you missed out on. This is one of the cases or one of the scenarios that you're not considering. So maybe we need to consider that as well. You also have to think about these integration from performance standpoints. In a recent example where we were importing these products from this third-party integration called as Akuya Dam, we were bringing in the data from Akuya Dam and PIM to our website. We were importing these products for different markets. And in this scenario, there were a good amount of products as well. So we wanted to ensure that this particular solution is performant as well. It's not happening that, let's say there's a cron process that is executed every day. And this cron process itself is taking a lot of time to import the products and you don't see updated products on the site. So you'll have to think about performance as well. And in the end, I would say the last thing, or I think the most important thing over here would be to think about the integration from security standpoint as well. You're not hampering the security of these third-party integrations. You're making sure that there are no data leaks. You're just using this data. You're getting this data from one side and displaying it on your site. You're just ensuring that you're also ensuring that all the guidelines are followed so that your security is also taken care of. So security is another measure that you'll have to take care of. I think these are the points where you start with the integration. You think about API guidelines, documentation that the developer provides, the developer from the platform provides. Then you'll have to think about performance. You'll have to think about scalability. You'll have to think about security as well. So all of these things are important while writing custom solution, or even though you're using a pre-existing solution, you should ensure that all of these measures are covered as well.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense, right? I mean, there's so many different aspects to this integration. And I think in the example that you took around the Akuya Dam, right? I mean, we have to also go back to the customer over there, I guess, to align on the product metadata as well. So while during the implementation, because that was changing how the product marketing or the product management team on the customer end, they wanted to manage these products for different regions in different currencies, right? And then understanding that metadata and the information set and the product attributes, and then bringing that on the website. I think so. Keeping that in mind is really, really crucial as well. So yeah, great. Yeah, thank you for providing this like kind of a detailed overview around the integration. Another question to you, Panshul, and maybe Abhishek, that you can also take a stab on this one, right? I mean, because one of the biggest aspect of these replatforming projects is the migration. I think it's kind of scary as well at times. Yeah. Things can go wrong as well. It affects the architecture. It affects how different things are looked upon, right? I mean, like be it integration and other things like that as well, right? So Panshul, right? What are the best approaches or best practices around migrating the content specifically from your previous platform to the new platform, be it Sitecore to Akuya, SharePoint to Drupal, Drupal 7 to Drupal 11? How do you approach these migrations?
Sure. I think to answer this question, we'll have to think about two scenarios over here. One is the automated migration and another one is manual migration. So you'll have to first understand what is it that you're going ahead with. Is it just going to be automated migration via some migration scripts, or is it just going to be manual migration? In case you go ahead with the automated migration, and in some cases there are both, right? In some cases we have seen that we have written scripts as well, but there are some help required from the customers as well so that they can also start with the manual migration. So I'll first talk about the automated migration where you'll have to write a script to move the content from one platform to another, be it from WordPress to Drupal, or be it from some other platform to Drupal, or it could be from different Drupal versions, between different Drupal versions. So in such cases, Drupal migration, the process that we generally follow within Drupal migrations is called as ETL process, which is extract, transform, and load, which is where your extraction process is about getting the data from the source and understanding the source, the type of data that you're getting in. This particular data may be available in CSV format, or this particular data may be available in JSON format. Any of the formats would work in such scenarios. So first process is extraction, getting in the data from the source. The second process is transform, where you start analyzing the data and start analyzing the data from the cleanup standpoint as well. Are there any things that are redundant to be moved to the new platform? And if that is the case, then that has to be removed from the scripts that you have got, the CSV export that you have got, the JSON export that you have got. So you get into that transformation phase, and in this phase, you also start writing different plugins that would be responsible to import the data. I'll take the example of moving different entities to Drupal. For example, let's say you're getting an image type of data from the source website. You'll start thinking about writing, maybe there's a requirement of writing a custom plugin to import this image in the form of media entity in Drupal. Generally, Drupal provides the process plugins to import these general data that are available from source to the destination. But in some cases, we have to write our custom solutions as well. So this is what happens when it comes to the transformation process, and towards the end is the load process, which is the actual import of the content to your new platform.
Okay.
So this is the complete process: extract, transform, and load. And I know there would be a question of what happens if anything goes wrong. What if you wrote something as part of your transform process and it works for you when you're using the test data. It works for you when you are using just small set of data to import the content. But in real world scenario, things break.
Right.
You end up moving some data to the site and you notice that your script is breaking. So in such cases, there are the rollback scenarios as well, where we'll have to think about rollbacks. So Drupal also takes care of rollbacks as well. So this is what, I think this is the complete process of the automated migration. And when it comes to the manual migration, the first and the most important thing for doing manual migration is to have the content type ready. If you don't have the content type ready, then what is it that you are going to migrate it to, right? There's no destination as such to move the data to. So first thing is to get the content type ready, figure out the number of fields that you'll require that will be required for this content type. Is it going to be the same? Or are there any changes? So for example, if there is a term that is used in some other platform and you call it as referenced entity in Drupal, is there a mapping available in between these two terms? And if not, how would you create that field on Drupal? So you end up creating all those fields as well. And once all the fields are created, you deploy these changes to your dev, staging, and production environment. You can then communicate to your customer saying that, the content type is ready on production. Why don't you start importing the content manually? Why don't you start creating the content manually? Maybe there would be multiple iterations required to firm up the content, but at least you can get started with it.
Got it. No, that's a very elaborative answer, Panshul. I mean, migration kind of touches upon so many different things, right? And linking with what I think, Sabreena, you also mentioned initially around the components, right? So it could be a big data field, but it can go into different components, right? Once those are there to create those new pages or new content entities in the replatform projects. So maybe Abhishek, to you, right? I mean, extending upon maybe what Panshul said, right? But then also touch upon a little bit more upon how do you ensure the data integrity and minimizing the downtime during this migration process? I understand the skills can be developed previously, but then when you're launching, right, how do you ensure the data is integrity is maintained, and then there's a seamless migration process
Correct.
executed on live
That's
environments
a
as
really
well?
interesting question, Prateek, and I appreciate when Panshul has elaborate all the ETL process, and gives us a better understanding how these migrations are actually executed. Mainly these automated migration, right? So to ensure the data integrity during Drupal migration, we start with a comprehensive audit of the source data and map it to the structure of the new Drupal platform. This ensures that every data type is accounted for and placed correctly into the source system, right? Additionally, we do a content freeze during the final phase of the migration that prevents the changes of the source data while the final data transfer takes place. So that's a strategy it is important to understand, because there are several businesses which has dependent on heavily content editing. For example, these are the news websites or media websites. They are continuously growing with the data, right? So we should have a cutoff time where we pause all the content editing for that particular time when we are executing this migration. And the other part of this question was how to ensure the downtime while this data is migrating, right? We employ a blue-green deployment strategy when there is a migration is performed on there is an exact replica is created, where we do all the migration on that particular replica environment, and once all the migration is done, then we just switch over maybe the domain name to pointing out that new replica, and then in that case your original website is up and running when this migration was executing or completing. By that time that your original website is up and running, and once you have done with the complete migration, you're just making a switch of your DNS for a shorter period. There would be a downtime, but will be preventing a longer downtime period. Another approach is queue-based migration, and it is useful for high traffic websites, right? So for just take an example of the news websites, where a lot of people is accessing these websites, and there is a lot of traffic. You cannot afford a downtime for such businesses or such websites, right? So what we do an incremental migration for that particular for these scenarios. We consider a queue-based migration in these websites when data is migrated in this particular strategy. That data will be migrated in chunks, so allowing the site to remain functional while these are migration is happening. All the migration is happening in the background, right? And the website is functioning in that case. For example, let's say there is a section of blogs in that particular website, right? So instead of fleshing out all the data that is available on that particular website, we would just replacing the blocks through the migration, right? So this trend-based or queue-based migration strategies will really come down your downtime, and the business will remain in continued operational while these migrations are executing.
I guess obviously we have talked about the build, starting the project, building these things, and then launching this. And so let's assume the projects are launched now, right? Now, successfully launched, I mean, the new website or new platform is up and running, right? What happens next? Like, I think this is a question to everyone, maybe, again, going a round table over here, right? Maybe starting with you, Sabreena. I guess, like, what happens? Like, once you go live, replatforming, how do you continue to ensure that the platform is growing, the customer's business is growing, and we are able to provide them the required support that is needed for their platform and business to continue running optimally and growing?
Yeah, that's right. So yeah, once we go with live, so after that, like we make sure like we are giving the ongoing support. Like there will be the maintenance, there will be some maintenance period that's going on, or the warranty period will be there. there will be maybe some maybe kind of they want to add more features, or they want to improve whatever the earlier, like we created an MVP plan basically. In that, maybe we prioritize some features, but we maybe cut down on some things. We want to improve that. So with the continuous support, what we can do is what features we earlier we freeze the features. Okay, we are going to do ABC in these things, but we want to improve that. We want to add add-ons on that. So in that, after post launch, we can grow with those additional kind of features that we want to, or with the existing features we want to improve upon. So those things we can, it will be a continuous kind of development after the launch as well, where we will consider those things, improve those features, existing features, add some small features so that we can improve that. Or in terms of maybe they change the mind and they want to something in terms of presentation layer as well. They want to change the probably the navigation, how it's working, or how the carousel is working. They want to change that. So that will happen post that, where it will be a kind of, we'll start from the beginning, like it will go similarly, like we will go through that discovery. Okay, if we are going to some change to that, if it's to the presentation layer or if it's the code. So it will be again that we will go from the discovery, we will go to the estimation, and then we will go to the strategy, and then again to the design, and then the implementation. So it depends upon the what kind of change we are going to bring. It's a small change request, then it will be direct implementation. I don't think that needs the whole process from the very beginning for the small request. But if it's the add-on or a new feature, that it involves again like a simultaneous, it will go through that phase from the beginning to the end of that. So those things we'll keep. And also the continuous testing, like if we are going to add those features, there should be a continuous testing also and a feedback. If you're going that, it will not impact the existing system, what we have launched. So that system should not get impacted. So continuous testing from the QA perspective, from the UAT, from the client side, the testing and the performance, are we maintaining that or it's breaking the existing system? So that things we have to consider along with the new changes that we're going to do.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, continuously evolving the platform to meet the new needs. And in fact, I guess, I mean, as the platform is launched, right, a lot of times if it's a new build, right, you don't think enough about the personalization strategy, or sometimes even that could be part of your original platform development as well. But then I guess after this launch, new data starts coming in as well, based on the analytics as well, right? I mean, sometimes customers look for how do they grow their business on the platform, like by adopting personalization, integrating with their marketing automation technologies, using platforms like CDPs, so that now they can unify their customer profile and all, right? So maybe Abhishek or Panshul, over to you, both of you, right? How do you see in this growth phase, right? I mean, how do you ensure that using this data, customer is able to adopt these tools and then integrate it and then grow it further? And then maybe what Sabreena mentioned, right? Again, going into a small discovery to understand that, and then rebuilding the platform, or not rebuilding the platform, but actually rebuilding those specific components or integrating more based on this data that is available now.
Sure. No, I think I can start answering this question. And the first thing that I would like to mention is that once the website is launched, the first thing that the most important thing that we generally do is we celebrate, because we have been working really hard.
Yeah.
You know, there are multiple calls, and all of these, I'm sure that these calls are not easy as well. In some cases, you have to come across difficult situations. So it is really important that you celebrate the success of the launch. And then you now is the time that you keep a track on these applications that you might have come across some third-party integrations. So for example, there is CDN integration in place. Sometimes the platform itself comes with the performance management tools. I'll take an example over here. Acquia Cloud comes up with New Relic as an integration, which is an APM. By APM, I means application performance management. And you can keep a track of the performance of the application. You can keep a track of the caching percentage as well, because these are really important things to consider once the website is launched. Because I know you're done with your work, but it is really important to ensure that the performance that you promised during the estimation phase, the performance that you promised also during the discovery sessions, is something that you're taking care of after the launch as well. Because in some cases, what happens is that while we are developing custom solutions, it gets really difficult to keep the track of the performance of the application. So you keep a track of the performance of the application even after the launch as well. Keep a check on those graphs. There are no spikes. The caching percentage is high. That's another way to keep a check. That's another way to maintain the application. And the most important thing is to keep a track of the errors that are coming in from the system as well, because no system is error proof, and there's no 100% perfect solution for any of the problems that we have come across. So there are cases, or there are scenarios where you'll notice some kind of warnings and errors as well. In our case at Axelerant, what we generally do is we integrate Sentry with our website, so that we are keeping a track of all the errors as well. And it's not just the development team who's keeping the track of these of these errors and of these warnings. There are multiple people involved internally as well who are keeping a track of the errors on these applications. There is the support team as well who is looking into it. So it's really important to do these kind of activities, do these kind of exercises where you are keeping a check on the health of your application. And based upon your observation, you go and create multiple tickets for the performance improvement, for the security improvement. And this is how you ensure that the application is regularly maintained, regularly updated, and it is error free, and there are no performance bottlenecks as well.
Yeah, makes sense. No, obviously while launching as well, we do a lot of these security checks, performance checks, but it's really important to do and continue to follow up on that post-launch as well in a hypercare mode, where ensuring the things are running appropriately the way they are supposed to, and then meeting the demands, right? I mean, sometimes there's a spike in the customer traffic as well, so we may have to do certain additional optimization as well, right? But yeah, over to you, Abhishek. Anything that you would like to add based on what Panshul and Sabreena added, and specifically around things like CDPs, marketing automation, like those also comes in, and customers now look to see how they can generate and improve their business based on this rebuild or new platform.
So yeah, so once your website is launched, and now it's a time for public to come and within your various matrices, you are seeing that there spikes, there are certain spikes and happening on your website, and there are a lot of activities are happening now. It is important to understand the behavior of your customers, your prospects, right? So so that means you need to have some sort of tooling where you can capture or understand the user's behavior, and based on that you can create your next best action, right? So in this case, the CDPs are the tool where you can capture these users, identify them, unify them from various other sources of your business, and then integrate and create a unified profile. Now, based on this unified profile, you can segment them based on your business needs or business alignments, right? And these business this for segments can be used by your other downstream application to run your personalized campaigns or any personalization things that you could do on this analysis, right? Secondly, you can build your marketing campaign, right? You have the right behaviors in place. You're now understanding the customers' patterns, their behavior, how they are approaching, and what are the actions they are doing on your platform. And based on that, you can send the retargeting or targeting emails. That's an example using your connected marketing automation tool. And secondly, let's say if you are running an e-commerce store, and you are seeing there is a significant users which are leaving a lot of product in their cart, right? So that is called there's a abandoned cart ratio is higher. Now you want to address this situation, and you can trap this user's behavior. You can run the right strategies, maybe an automated email solution, or maybe you can integrate let's say the WhatsApp application to send the personalized WhatsApp messages, email messages, any sort of communication medium to re-engage those users to come back and make the purchase on your websites. So these are the additional integration that can be integrated after your project launch and during your growth phase of your website.
So I think what we all of you spoke about is that obviously while it's important to get to that go live stage, right, but it's also important to kind of align on what's next from there, right? I mean, depending upon the data, depending upon how we see the platform is behaving from the application performance security perspective versus also from the business side that Abhishek you touched upon, right? Knowing that and then kind of feeding that again into the strategy, figuring out the next steps, be it personalization, marketing automation and all, right, which could again lead to kind of redeveloping the parts of the application, integrating few more applications, or doing the continuous development and enhancement like Sabreena mentioned earlier, right? So I guess replatforming is never done. I mean, it's even if it's done one time, I think it's important to kind of know what next can be done and then continue to do that based on your product roadmap. Great. I think this has been really insightful discussion. Thank you again, Panshul, Abhishek, and Sabreena. I'm so glad that we did this, and you all agree to kind of be part of this marathon series of 4 episodes. I know it has taken a kind of a lot of effort, a lot of efforts, learnings to kind of get through it and continue on this journey. But I'm really glad that we did this. We came together for this thing, and I'm really sure that this would be helpful not only for our internal engineers and the architects, but also to external audience as well as the customers who are looking to replatform projects. So thank you for joining me on this journey.
Thank you so much, Prateek.
Thanks, Prateek. Yeah, we got the chance to speak about our experiences so far.
Thank you.
We'll come back with more episodes, more mini-series like it. But then, yeah, till then, see you. Take care and bye.